The story of Esau, the son of Isaac and Rebekah, is one of the most mysterious and thought-provoking accounts in the Bible. Before his birth, a divine proclamation revealed that the destiny of Esau and his twin brother Jacob would be marked by rivalry. What makes Esau's story particularly striking is that he was described as a man whom God hated, even before he had taken his first breath. This raises profound questions about the nature of divine justice, human choices, and God's sovereignty. In this video, we'll explore the life of Esau, the reasons behind this harsh judgment, and what his story means for us today. Rebekah, the wife of Isaac and mother of Esau and Jacob, found herself experiencing an unusual pregnancy. What should have been a time of joyful anticipation became a period of confusion and distress. Her womb was a battlefield, and the children within her seemed to be engaged in an inexplicable struggle. Day and night, she felt their movements, not as gentle signs of life, but as relentless conflict. Disturbed and unable to understand what was happening, Rebekah sought the Lord for answers. In those ancient times, seeking God's guidance often involved prayer, meditation, or visiting a prophet. Rebekah's earnest plea for understanding was met with a direct and divine revelation. God explained to her that the struggle in her womb was not an ordinary occurrence. It was the beginning of a rivalry that would shape history. "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you shall be divided. One shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Genesis 25:23. This prophecy was extraordinary. It not only predicted the lives of the twins, but also foretold the destinies of their descendants. Esau and Jacob would become the progenitors of two distinct nations, the Edomites and the Israelites. From the outset, the lives of these two unborn children were intertwined with a cosmic purpose that was far greater than themselves. However, the striking detail of the prophecy was its reversal of the natural order. In ancient cultures, the firstborn son held a position of honor and received the primary inheritance, both material and spiritual. Yet, God declared that the younger child would take precedence over the elder, a statement that foreshadowed a lifetime of conflict and drama. As the days of Rebekah's pregnancy progressed, her anxiety grew. It was not just the physical discomfort of carrying twins, but the weight of knowing that her children were part of a divine plan filled with conflict. Did she wonder about her role in this unfolding drama? Did she fear for the future of her family? Or did she trust fully in God's revelation? The Bible does not elaborate on Rebekah's inner thoughts, but the intensity of her situation must have been overwhelming. When the time came for the twins to be born, their entrance into the world only confirmed the prophecy. Esau emerged first, his body red and covered with hair, giving him a wild and rugged appearance. His name, which means hairy, reflected this striking physical trait. Jacob followed immediately, grasping Esau's heel as if to pull him back. This image of Jacob holding Esau's heel became a symbol of their future relationship, one of struggle, competition, and reversal of fortunes. Jacob's name, meaning supplanter or heel grabber, foreshadowed his role in taking what traditionally belonged to Esau. From their very birth, the contrast between the two brothers was evident. Esau was the rugged, physical one, while Jacob was quieter and more reflective. Esau's fiery appearance and bold nature seemed to set the stage for his life as a man of the field, a hunter and a person driven by impulse. In contrast, Jacob's subtle actions hinted at a calculating mind and a focus on spiritual matters. This stark difference between the twins was not merely a matter of personality. but a reflection of their deeper destinies as revealed by God. The struggle that began in Rebekah's womb became the foundation for a story that would span generations. It was a battle not only between two brothers, but also between two ways of life, two sets of values, and two divine purposes. Rebekah's experience teaches us that sometimes God's plans are difficult to understand, especially when they involve conflict or disruption. Her story reminds us that divine purposes often challenge human expectations and traditions. The prophecy she received set the stage for a family drama filled with love, betrayal, and redemption. As we delve deeper into the lives of Esau and Jacob, we begin to see how the choices they made, combined with God's sovereign plan, shaped their futures. The struggle in Rebekah's womb was not just a physical phenomenon, but a spiritual and historical turning point that continues to hold profound significance in the narrative of God's relationship with humanity. Esau, as the firstborn son of Isaac, held a unique and privileged position within his family. In the cultural context of the time, the firstborn son was entitled to the birthright, a set of rights and responsibilities that extended beyond material inheritance. The birthright symbolized leadership of the family, a double portion of the inheritance, and, most importantly, the continuation of the covenant God had made with Abraham and Isaac. For Esau, this meant he was poised to be the heir of God's promises, a role that carried profound spiritual significance. Yet, Esau's character was one of impulsivity and short-sightedness. Unlike his brother Jacob, who seemed introspective and forward-thinking, Esau was a man of immediate desires and physical pursuits. The Bible describes Esau as a skilled hunter and a man of the open country, someone who thrived in the wilderness and relied on his physical strength. This lifestyle contrasted sharply with Jacob's, who stayed closer to home and was described as a quiet man dwelling in tents. Genesis 25:27. While Esau's ruggedness made him his father's favorite, it also highlighted a disposition that valued the tangible and immediate over the spiritual and eternal. The defining moment in Esau's life, and the turning point for his birthright, occurred on an ordinary day when he returned from the fields famished. Jacob, who was cooking a pot of lentil stew, seized the opportunity to exploit his brother's weakness. Seeing Esau's desperation, Jacob made a bold and calculating offer. "Sell me your birthright now." Genesis 25-31. At that moment, Esau was faced with a choice that would determine the course of his life and legacy. Tragically, he dismissed the long-term value of his birthright for the sake of immediate gratification. "I am about to die," Esau said. "Of what use is a birthright to me?" Genesis 25:32. Esau's decision to sell his birthright for a single meal of stew is one of the most poignant examples in Scripture of sacrificing what is most valuable for what is fleeting. His words, "Of what use is a birthright to me?" reveal a profound disregard for the spiritual heritage and responsibilities that came with his position as the firstborn. To Esau, the birthright was an abstract concept with no immediate benefit, while the stew was tangible and satisfying in the moment. This exchange, though seemingly minor, was a reflection of Esau's character and priorities. The Bible does not suggest that Esau was coerced or tricked into this decision. Jacob's offer was shrewd and opportunistic, but Esau made the choice willingly. By agreeing to the trade, he showed that he valued his physical appetite over the divine blessing and covenantal inheritance that were his by birth. The gravity of this choice is underscored in Scripture, which states, "Thus Esau despised his birthright." Genesis 25:34. To despise something, in biblical terms, is not merely to undervalue it, but to treat it with contempt. Esau's actions demonstrated that he had little regard for the things of God. The aftermath of this decision may not have been immediately apparent to Esau, but it set the stage for the eventual loss of his father's blessing and the broader consequences of his choices. The birthright, while spiritual in nature, was deeply connected to the family's future and God's covenantal plan. By trading it away, Esau effectively removed himself from the lineage through which God's promises to Abraham would be fulfilled. Esau's impulsive decision is a cautionary tale with enduring relevance. How often do people today sacrifice what is valuable and lasting for the sake of immediate gratification? Esau's story invites us to reflect on our own priorities and consider whether we, like Esau, are tempted to trade eternal blessings for temporary satisfaction. His choice also serves as a reminder of the importance of recognizing the spiritual significance of our actions. Isaac's favoritism toward Esau adds another layer of complexity to the story. Esau's skills as a hunter and provider endeared him to his father, creating a dynamic where Esau may have felt secure in his role as the favored son. This favoritism may have contributed to his lack of appreciation for the birthright, as he likely assumed that his position as Isaac's firstborn was unshakable. Yet, God's plans were not bound by human traditions or preferences. The birthright was not merely about family hierarchy, but about God's sovereign will, and Esau's disregard for it ultimately placed him outside the scope of God's covenantal purposes. Esau's choice to sell his birthright for a bowl of stew was not just a single impulsive act, but a window into his heart and values. It revealed a man driven by the desires of the flesh, with little concern for the things of the spirit. This defining moment shaped the rest of his life, creating a ripple effect that would lead to further loss and estrangement. It also set Esau apart from Jacob, whose flawed yet persistent desire for God's blessing and favor placed him in the lineage of the covenant. Esau's story forces us to confront the tension between human freedom and divine sovereignty. While his actions were his own, they aligned with the prophecy given to Rebekah before his birth. The older shall serve the younger. Was Esau's fate sealed from the beginning, or did his choices merely confirm the divine plan? The interplay between Esau's decisions and God's purposes remains one of the enduring mysteries of his story, challenging readers to consider how their own lives align with God's will. In the end, Esau's impulsive decision to trade his birthright was a turning point that symbolized his failure to recognize and cherish the blessings of God. His story serves as a solemn reminder of the dangers of living for the moment and neglecting the eternal. It calls us to value the spiritual inheritance we have been given and to live with an awareness of the long-term consequences of our choices. Through Esau's loss, we are invited to pursue what truly matters and to align our lives with God's purposes, lest we too despise the blessings that have been entrusted to us. The next pivotal moment in Esau's story came when his brother Jacob, with the help of their mother Rebekah, deceived their father Isaac to obtain the blessing intended for Esau. This act of betrayal, steeped in family dynamics and divine prophecy, became one of the most famous and contentious episodes in biblical history. The blessing, distinct from the birthright Esau had already forfeited, was a formal and powerful declaration of God's favor and provision. In the ancient world, such blessings were considered irrevocable and held profound spiritual and material significance. Isaac, by this point, was old and nearly blind. Knowing his time was near, he summoned Esau and instructed him to prepare a special meal. Esau was to hunt wild game, prepare it as his father liked, and then receive the blessing reserved for the firstborn. This moment represented a chance for Esau to solidify his position as Isaac's favored son, despite the loss of his birthright. The blessing would confirm his leadership within the family and establish his descendants as rulers of a great nation. However, Rebekah overheard Isaac's instructions and took immediate action to intervene. Her favoritism toward Jacob, coupled with her knowledge of God's prophecy that the older shall serve the younger, drove her to devise a plan to ensure Jacob received the blessing instead of Esau. She instructed Jacob to bring her 2 young goats from the flock, which she would prepare in a way that mimicked the taste of wild game. To complete the deception, she covered Jacob's arms and neck with goatskins to imitate Esau's hairy skin, and dressed him in Esau's best clothes to carry the scent of the fields. Jacob hesitated at first, fearing discovery and a curse instead of a blessing. But Rebekah reassured him, taking responsibility for any consequences. Emboldened by his mother's confidence, Jacob went to Isaac with the prepared meal, presenting himself as Esau. When Isaac questioned how the food had been prepared so quickly, Jacob lied, claiming that God had granted him success in the hunt. Isaac, still suspicious, asked to touch Jacob's hands. Feeling the goatskins, Isaac remarked, "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are the hands of Esau." Genesis 27:22. Ultimately, Isaac's doubts were overridden, and he pronounced the blessing over Jacob. The blessing was profound and far-reaching. Isaac declared that Jacob would have abundance. "May God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine." Genesis 27:28. He affirmed Jacob's authority, stating, "Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you." Genesis 27:29. The blessing also included a curse on those who cursed him, and a blessing on those who blessed him, echoing God's covenant with Abraham. When Esau returned from the hunt, he prepared the meal as his father had requested and brought it to Isaac, unaware of what had just transpired. The shock and anguish that followed were devastating. Isaac trembled violently upon realizing he had been deceived, and Esau cried out with a bitter and heartbreaking plea, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." Genesis 27:34. But Isaac could not reverse the blessing he had given to Jacob. Esau's desperation and sorrow are palpable in the narrative as he begged for any remaining blessing. Isaac, moved by Esau's anguish, did pronounce a secondary blessing, but it was far from the grandeur of Jacob's. Esau's blessing foretold a life of struggle and independence. "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck." Genesis 27:39-40. This prophecy hinted at the eventual rebellion of Esau's descendants, the Edomites, against Jacob's descendants, the Israelites. Esau's response to this betrayal was a mixture of heartbreak and fury. The bitterness of losing both his birthright and his blessing drove him to hatred toward Jacob. He resolved to kill his brother as soon as their father passed away, saying to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." Genesis 27:41. Once again, Rebekah intervened, warning Jacob of Esau's intentions and sending him away to her brother Laban in Haran. This marked the beginning of Jacob's long exile and the estrangement between the two brothers. Esau's loss of the blessing was a critical turning point in his life, marking a shift from favored son to a man cast aside by the unfolding of God's plan. Yet, it is important to note that the betrayal was not merely an isolated act of deception, but a culmination of choices and circumstances. Esau's earlier disregard for his birthright and his impulsive nature had already distanced him from the spiritual legacy of his family. While Jacob's actions were undeniably deceitful, they were also aligned with the prophecy that the older would serve the younger. This episode raises profound questions about family dynamics, human agency, and divine sovereignty. Rebekah's role in orchestrating the deception reflects a deep trust in God's promise, but her methods have often been criticized as manipulative and divisive. Jacob's willingness to deceive his father and supplant his brother demonstrates his determination to secure the blessing, but also highlights his moral flaws. Meanwhile, Isaac's preference for Esau and Esau's own choices underscore the complexities of favoritism and the consequences of prioritizing the physical over the spiritual. For Esau, the loss of the blessing was both a personal and generational tragedy. His tears and cries of anguish reflect a man who realized too late the value of what he had lost. The blessing, once given, could not be reclaimed, leaving Esau with a future that was far removed from the promises of God's covenant. Yet, even in his pain and anger, Esau's story was not over. His descendants, the Edomites, would play a significant role in the history of Israel, both as allies and adversaries. Esau's experience challenges readers to consider how their own actions and decisions align with God's purposes. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of undervaluing spiritual blessings and the long-term consequences of choices made in moments of weakness or impulse. At the same time, it serves as a reminder of God's sovereignty, working through flawed human beings to fulfill his divine plan. The loss of the blessing, though devastating for Esau, was a pivotal moment in the unfolding of a greater story, one that would shape the destiny of nations and reveal the depths of God's redemptive purposes. After losing both his birthright and his father's blessing, Esau's life took a path that set him apart from the covenantal heritage of his family. While Jacob fled to Haran to escape Esau's wrath and build a future under the guidance of God, Esau remained in Canaan and began to carve out his life on his own terms. This divergence in paths not only highlighted the contrast between the two brothers, but also underscored Esau's departure from the spiritual legacy of Abraham and Isaac. Esau's life outside the covenant was marked by decisions that reflected his values and priorities, decisions that further distanced him from the promises of God. One of Esau's most consequential choices was his marriage to Hittite women. The Bible recounts that Esau took 2 wives from among the Canaanites, Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. Genesis 26:34. This decision was a significant departure from the practices of his family, who emphasized marrying within their own people to preserve the spiritual and cultural integrity of their lineage. Abraham, for instance, had gone to great lengths to ensure that Isaac's wife came from his homeland and shared in the worship of the one true God. Esau's marriage to the Hittite women caused great distress to his parents, Isaac and Rebekah. The Bible states, "They made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah." Genesis 26:35. These marriages were not just a matter of personal preference, but a reflection of Esau's disregard for the spiritual values of his family. The Hittites were part of the Canaanite population, known for their idolatrous practices and moral corruption. By aligning himself with these people, Esau not only rejected his family's traditions, but also placed himself outside the covenantal blessings that required separation from pagan influences. This decision further highlighted the contrast between Esau and Jacob. While Jacob obeyed his parents' instructions to seek a wife from their extended family, Esau seemed to act impulsively and without regard for the spiritual implications of his choices. His marriages symbolized a deeper spiritual estrangement from the God of Abraham and Isaac. Esau's focus on his immediate desires and cultural assimilation demonstrated a life oriented around the physical and temporal rather than the spiritual and eternal. In an attempt to win back his parents' favor after realizing their disapproval of his Hittite wives, Esau took another wife. He married Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, Genesis 28, 8-9. This decision appeared to be an effort to connect himself to the broader family lineage. However, even this marriage reflected Esau's lack of spiritual discernment. Ishmael's line, while biologically connected to Abraham, was not part of the covenantal promise. Esau's marriage to Mahalath, rather than rectifying his position, reinforced his misunderstanding of the nature of the covenant and his exclusion from its blessings. Esau's life in Canaan was marked by his role as a man of the world, living by his own strength and instincts. He became a skilled hunter and a man of the fields, thriving in the harsh and rugged environment of the region. His physical prowess and self-reliance made him successful in a worldly sense, but these qualities also reflected his disconnection from the spiritual heritage of his family. Unlike Jacob, who sought God's guidance and blessings even through his flaws and deceptions, Esau seemed content to live outside the scope of divine providence. Esau's descendants, the Edomites, reflected this divergence from the covenant. The Edomites settled in the region of Mount Seir, south of the land of Canaan, and established a nation that often stood in opposition to Israel. While Esau's prosperity and the growth of his lineage were undeniable, they existed outside the direct blessings and promises of God. The Edomites' eventual conflicts with Israel further underscored the separation between Esau's line and the chosen people of God. Despite their shared ancestry, the two nations were defined by their contrasting spiritual legacies. Esau's story also serves as a reminder of the consequences of prioritizing worldly success over spiritual faithfulness. While he achieved material prosperity and built a nation, his legacy was one of estrangement from the God of his fathers. The Bible contrasts Esau's focus on immediate gratification and temporal success with Jacob's pursuit of spiritual blessings, even when achieved through flawed means. Esau's life outside the covenant was not marked by overt rebellion or malice, but by a series of choices that revealed his priorities and values. Yet, Esau's life is not without moments of redemption and humanity. Later in the biblical narrative, Esau shows a remarkable capacity for forgiveness when he reconciles with Jacob after years of estrangement. Despite his losses and grievances, Esau embraced his brother with genuine affection, saying, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Genesis 33:9. This act of reconciliation demonstrated that Esau, though outside the covenantal promises, was not entirely devoid of grace and virtue. His willingness to forgive and move forward reflected a complexity in his character that goes beyond his earlier impulsiveness and short-sightedness. Esau's life outside the covenant is a story of choices and consequences, highlighting the tension between human freedom and divine sovereignty. It challenges readers to consider their own priorities and the legacy they are building. Esau's decisions serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of valuing the immediate and tangible over the eternal and spiritual. At the same time, his story offers a glimpse of redemption and humanity, reminding us that even those who seem far from God's purposes are not beyond the reach of grace and reconciliation. Ultimately, Esau's legacy as the father of the Edomites and his life outside the covenant underscore the central theme of God's sovereign plan. While Esau's choices placed him outside the direct blessings of the covenant, his life and lineage were still part of the broader tapestry of God's redemptive history. Through Esau and his descendants, the story of God's faithfulness to his promises and his people continues to unfold, inviting us to reflect on our own place within his divine plan. Esau's story concludes with a legacy that is both complex and tragic, steeped in mystery and divine sovereignty. As the father of the Edomites, Esau's life and lineage became emblematic of a people often in conflict with God's chosen nation, Israel. His life raises enduring questions about divine election, human responsibility, and the interplay between God's sovereign will and human choices. The biblical declaration, "Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated," Malachi 1:2 chapter 3, Romans 9:13, has sparked centuries of theological debate and reflection. Why would God express such stark opposition to Esau even before his birth? What does this mean for Esau's legacy, and what lessons can we draw from his life? To understand Esau's legacy, it is essential to revisit the prophecy given to Rebekah during her pregnancy. "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger." Genesis 25:23. This prophecy, delivered before either child had done anything good or bad, underscores the sovereignty of God in determining the destinies of individuals and nations. Esau's position as the elder twin, which should have guaranteed him the birthright and blessing, was overturned by divine decree. This reversal of the natural order points to a God who operates beyond human traditions and expectations. Esau's role as the progenitor of the Edomites fulfilled part of the prophecy. The Edomites settled in the region of Mount Seir and became a powerful nation. However, their relationship with Israel, the nation descended from Jacob, was marked by enmity and tension. When the Israelites were journeying from Egypt to the Promised Land, the Edomites refused them passage through their territory, forcing them to take a longer and more difficult route. Numbers 20:14-21. This act of hostility set the tone for future conflicts between the two nations. Throughout biblical history, the Edomites are portrayed as adversaries of Israel. They participated in military confrontations, supported Israel's enemies, and even rejoiced in Israel's downfall. The prophet Obadiah condemned Edom for its pride and treachery, warning of divine judgment. "Because of the violence done to your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever." Obadiah 1:10. This prophecy reflects the deep-seated animosity between the two nations and serves as a reminder of the lasting consequences of Esau's separation from the covenantal blessings. The declaration in Malachi, "Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated," further solidifies the biblical portrayal of Esau and his descendants as being outside the scope of God's covenantal favor. This statement, repeated by the Apostle Paul in Romans 9, has been the subject of significant theological discussion. Does this mean God arbitrarily rejected Esau? Or is this a reflection of Esau's choices and character? While the Bible emphasizes God's sovereignty in choosing Jacob over Esau, it also highlights Esau's own decisions, which revealed a lack of regard for spiritual matters. By selling his birthright for a meal, marrying outside the covenant, and aligning himself with the pagan culture of the Canaanites, Esau demonstrated a pattern of valuing the temporal over the eternal. Paul's use of this passage in Romans 9 situates Esau's story within the broader context of divine election. Paul explains that God's choice of Jacob over Esau was not based on their works, but on his purpose and calling. This assertion underscores the doctrine of grace, that God's favor is not earned but given according to his will. Esau's rejection serves as a stark reminder of the mystery of God's sovereignty, which often defies human understanding. At the same time, it challenges readers to trust in God's plan, even when it seems unfair or incomprehensible. Despite the harsh language used to describe Esau, his life also includes moments of redemption and reconciliation. One of the most poignant scenes in his story occurs when he meets Jacob after years of estrangement. Jacob, fearing Esau's wrath, approaches him with gifts and humility, bowing repeatedly as a sign of submission. Yet Esau surprises him with an embrace, weeping and expressing forgiveness. Genesis 33:4. This moment of grace and humanity reveals a depth to Esau's character that is often overshadowed by his earlier impulsiveness and estrangement from the covenant. Esau's reconciliation with Jacob also serves as a testament to the power of forgiveness and the possibility of healing even the deepest familial wounds. While Esau remained outside the covenantal blessings, his willingness to forgive Jacob and move forward with his life demonstrates a resilience and generosity of spirit that should not be overlooked. It is a reminder that, despite his exclusion from the lineage of the Messiah, Esau was not beyond the reach of grace and redemption. The legacy of Esau and the Edomites also points to the broader theme of God's redemptive plan. While the Edomites were often portrayed as enemies of Israel, they were not entirely outside the scope of God's purposes. The prophets occasionally included Edom in their visions of future restoration. For example, Amos prophesied that the remnant of Edom would be included in God's kingdom, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the nations who are called by my name. Amos 9-12. This prophecy suggests that, despite their history of conflict, the Edomites were not beyond the possibility of redemption. Esau's story, when viewed in its entirety, is a complex tapestry of human choices, divine sovereignty, and the enduring consequences of prioritizing the temporal over the eternal. It challenges readers to reflect on their own lives and consider whether they are valuing God's blessings and purposes or trading them for fleeting desires. At the same time, it serves as a reminder of God's ultimate authority and the mystery of his plans, which often operate beyond human understanding. Esau's life and legacy continue to resonate as a cautionary tale and a source of reflection. His experiences invite us to examine our own priorities, relationships, and faithfulness to God's calling. While his rejection by God may seem harsh, it also underscores the gravity of our choices and the importance of aligning our lives with God's purposes. Yet, even in the midst of rejection and conflict, Esau's story includes moments of grace and redemption, reminding us that no one is entirely beyond the reach of God's mercy.